Maverick News. The world is watching. In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Strange Bedfellows, episode 29. I'm Lori Spencer. You already know me. You know Rick Walker from Maverick News. How you doing, Rick?
I'm just fine, thanks. I hope you're well as well.
I'm doing good. It's been another crazy week. This is just the new normal. It's just when you think it can't get any crazier, it does.
I hate that phrase.
I know. For 4 years now, we've heard about the new normal. And I just, like you said yesterday on the show, I miss the before times.
Sure do.
I don't think we can get them back, though. Do you?
I keep hoping. I think we've got a path back. If we choose to follow it, it would be a little bit different, maybe better if we work at it. But got to have leadership and a vision.
That's right. That's right. And we need peace. You know, we need to stop World War III from escalating and inflaming the entire Middle East and the entire globe.
Oh, yeah.
And like you said, that all comes down to leadership, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Sure does.
And you know, I'm really excited about our guest tonight. It's been a while since we had him on last. Our friend Arkady Itkin, who a lot of you have probably seen over on Scott Ritter's channel, the U.S. Tour of Duty channel. He's a frequent guest over there, and he's also been a guest on this program, but we haven't caught up with Arkady in a while. The last time he was with us was just after this war started in Gaza. It was like last October. So a lot's happened since then. We got a lot of catching up to do. Arkady is a really interesting guy. He's an attorney in San Francisco now. He was actually born in Russia, raised in Israel, served in the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF. And the last time we had him on, it wasn't exactly a debate, but we had our friend Don DeBar, who was on the show kind of representing the Palestinian point of view. And then we had Arkady on representing the Israeli point of view. But we only had an hour with him, and that just didn't seem like enough time. So I wanted to bring him back in. Our good friend, Arkady Itkin. Welcome back to Strange Bedfellows. Great to see you, my friend.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for having me over again.
Great
Wonderful to see you.
Yeah.
Likewise. A lot has happened over the past few months. You're never short on stories to talk about, right?
For some reason, I'm having difficulty hearing your microphone. I don't know if you can turn up your volume level just a little bit so we can hear you better, Arkady?
Let me try. Is this better?
Yes, much better. Much better.
Okay, very good. Okay, great. Okay, please go ahead.
Well, tell us a little bit about what the last 5.5 months have been like for you.
You know, it's been very difficult for me for several reasons. Number one, because, you know, I grew up there. My mom still lives there. And number two, it is such a special place. And I would recommend that anyone travels there. You love Israel. You hate Israel. You care about Palestine. You don't. Because it's such a special place, it really hurts that all these horrible things are happening there and there is no end to it.
It's been like that your whole life, hasn't it?
It wasn't this bad, but I guess it's a reminder that anything can happen. Things can escalate in a matter of hours, in a matter of minutes. And it's a painful reminder.
Are you still a citizen, an Israeli citizen? Do you have dual citizenship?
Triple.
So you're Russian too?
Yes.
Is that right?
Correct.
Cool. How cool is that? So you get to vote in Israeli elections, right?
You cannot vote remotely. That's not how it works there. You have to be present in order to vote there. And you actually have to live there. I believe you have to register. You have to be a permanent resident. And the idea there is they don't want someone who doesn't have a stake in living there to vote just because of their ideological predispositions, theoretical predispositions. So it's an interesting approach, very different from ours.
So what do you think about Netanyahu? What are your thoughts on him?
I don't have very strong thoughts. I think, like many others, like Trump, like many others, he's a mixed bag. So people here think that really don't love Netanyahu, don't like him right now because he is too aggressive. They don't realize that many, if not majority, are frustrated with him because he doesn't go as hard as they would like him to go. He's not as aggressive as they would like him to be. And that's something that people here don't talk about. And yeah.
That's interesting because the perception, at least on our side of the pond, is that he's too aggressive. That's what we're told. He's waging a genocidal war and he's a madman,
So the frequent debate there among scholars, among different politicians is, why should we be sacrificing our soldiers every day? 3, 4, 5 people die in order to protect their civilians when most of their civilians are supporting what's going on, the holy war against Israel. So there is that attitude. I'm not sure what the alternative is. Carpet bombing? I mean, I don't know what the alternative they propose, but they would rather send less troops in and to do more of the air, more of the artillery. And and that's something that nobody ever talks about here. But
and that's how the war began, right? I mean, in the early days of the war, back in October, they were waging war mostly from the skies, doing airstrikes, and of course, that's when the international community went wild because so many of the civilians hadn't had a chance to evacuate. Buildings were just flattened on top of people, and we saw these shocking, horrible images of civilians being killed. And so Israel pulled back. The international community said, no. And so they sent in ground forces and have been, unfortunately, losing a lot of them because it's a much riskier process.
Of course.
And I wanted to, since you served in the IDF, I know it's been several years since you were actually in the IDF, but tell me a little bit about your experiences. I'm sure you had to do ground operations was it the West Bank? Was it Gaza? Tell me what that was like.
So I'm not going to, of course, compare. I wasn't nowhere near these types of operation. We did patrols. We did random searches. There were a few incidents here and there in the West Bank. It was nothing like this. There were no drones back then. The people in the West Bank, despite the fact that they're also for resistance, they didn't have the type of weapons that apparently the Hamas militants have, RPGs, anti-tank missiles. So I thought we were very, very humane. We were very, nobody enjoyed killing anybody. Nobody derived joy from killing people. All we're trying to do is, like a police, maintain order. So if anybody out there thinks that the Israelis just enjoy, they're bloodthirsty, they just enjoy killing Palestinians, maybe there is 1% of settlers who talk like this just because they like to bark. They actually usually don't serve. The soldiers, they're normal people. Most of them are students. They're either about to go to college. Maybe they just finished high school and they were partying all summer. Maybe they're reservists who are engineers in their real life, who go to Dubai, who go to Arabic restaurants, who pride themselves on being open-minded, on trying to understand the culture, other cultures, whether it's Christian, whether Muslims. These are not animals who are looking to kill Palestinians. And if you ever go to Israel, you will realize it. You will understand it very quickly.
Right, because there's this whole narrative, if you get your history or your news from social media, what we in the West are told, of course, is that, the Israelis love killing Palestinians. They're trying to maximize civilian casualties and they don't give a damn. But what I hear from the people I know in Israel who are connected to the IDF tell me a completely different story. So I'm just trying to get to the truth.
Well, the reason people say it here is because they have no clue about how wars work, what it takes to fight, what it takes to survive. They don't realize that, unlike in movies where you point a gun at someone, they point at you while you're talking and negotiating and the tension is building up. In real life, it's completely different. You hear a noise, you unload the whole magazine of bullets because it's either you first or them first. That's how a lot of innocent people die. You do your best. There is an apartment with a terrorist that you get intelligence about. You throw a rocket in there. Guess what? 2-3 other apartments on that floor are probably going to collapse, and a lot of people are going to die. Of course, it happens everywhere. There is no way to avoid it. They do their best, and anyone who knows what they're talking about will know that 30,000 innocent people under the circumstances is not a high number. That number alone shows that a lot of effort did go into not having a lot of innocent casualties and into minimizing civilian casualties.
Right. And there's all this questioning on both sides, right? You've got the pro-Palestinian people who question what happened on October 7th, what the actual casualty numbers were. They question whether or not women were raped, whether or not these atrocities even happened. And then on the Israeli side, and here in the West, we question the numbers that we get, the casualty figures out of the Gaza Health Ministry, because that's Hamas. I mean, Hamas is the elected government of Gaza. Do we really trust their numbers? What are your thoughts on that, Arkady?
So the numbers actually sound reasonable to me. Now about Israel, does it really matter how many women were raped and whether babies were beheaded? Does it matter whether it was 1,200 people killed or 1,300? Does it matter if 20,000 Palestinians or 30,000 Palestinians were killed? To me, the number sounds reasonable. So I cannot dispute this, but again, I don't think it matters that much. But I wanted to make a few points with your permission, if I could.
Sure.
Okay. So, over the past few months, I've been trying to listen to every voice possible, especially voices of scholars of Islam and foreign relations in the Middle East who are actually located in the area, and they have a much deeper discussion of what's going on than the English-speaking media. They're looking at things from a theological perspective, something that we never do here. Now, everyone has their own voice around, if you noticed, from referring to what's going on as genocide and apartheid and murder of innocent civilians and children to Israel being good and Hamas being evil, and Israel doing the very best under the circumstances. And you know what? Maybe everyone has a little bit of truth to what they're saying. Maybe that's where we are. But I do want to make a few random observations here.
Please.
Neither Americans nor Russians nor most other countries can relate to Israelis in this conflict for several reasons. The people here who tell you that they want to destroy you and who are not only willing to die doing it, they're happy to die doing this, are not 1,000 miles away, not 500 miles away, but 5-10 miles away from where you are. How much space for error do you have under the circumstances? Number two, Israelis have been subjected to totally random terrorist attacks for decades. Stabbings, shootings, bus explosions, Molotov cocktails, every single day, being run over by cars, anywhere for no reason, completely random. This adds up. Now, the beautiful thing about podcasts in the Middle East is that they're not impeded by white guilt. They're not beating around the bush. People say what they want to say, and they're not afraid of sounding racist, Islamophobic. And this is what many of them say, and this gains a lot of popularity lately in Israel. The only way for Israel to survive is to crush the other side, whatever it takes. In the Middle East, total force and total defeat are the only paths to peace historically. They urge the world not to measure the dynamic in the Middle East by their Western values. It never worked and it never will. I can just give one example. At some point, Israel thought that if they give Gaza money, if they give them opportunities, then they will be happy and they will leave them alone. That's not what they want. That's not what they never said that we want money and then we'll leave you alone. This is what we think we want, and this is what we think they want. Different people, different culture. Now, unlike America, Israelis are much more flexible. They do change their political views much quicker and much more significantly than us. Here, we pride ourselves to sticking to always Trump, never Trump, blue no matter who, whatever. There now, the country is much more right-wing, much more pro-law and order or pro-going hard in this war than it's ever been before. Some of the most leftist people that I knew who said, let's take the higher ground. Let's kill them with kindness. Let's turn the other cheek, whatever. They completely changed their position.
That's so true. I just wanted to say that I have friends who are, kibbutz dwellers. And in the kibbutzim, as you well know, that's kind of the last bastion of labor socialism. You can't get much further to the left, right, than the kibbutzim. But October 7th, these are the people, by the way, who made frequent trips into Gaza, had friends in Gaza, had employees that came across the border to work for them, and truly believed in peace. These were the hippies, the peaceniks, and they were butchered on October 7th by the people that they thought they could trust. And even the far left, it seems, in Israel has said after October 7th, we're all in. Let's smash Hamas.
So absolutely, they say no. This is one of the most extreme examples of no good deed goes unpunished. And I think the other side knows this about us, and they leverage the white guilt and the white savior complex to the full extent. To the full extent, they make it work. Now, on that note, I have two questions. First, ceasefire. Ceasefire. Who is asking for ceasefire? Last time I checked, Hamas and Hezbollah say total annihilation of Israel, total obliteration. Why do you want ceasefire? Let's fight. That's first question.
Same with Israel. And neither side seems to want a ceasefire. It's just this delusion in the minds of Western politicians who've been saying this for 30 years as if it's going to work, but it never does.
Let's say Hamas says we want a ceasefire. They do say we'll give you some hostages if you do ceasefire. Why do you want ceasefire? I thought you wanted to fight and obliterate us and wipe us out of the map. That's number one. My second question, two-state solution. I don't remember Hamas or anyone else is asking for two states. On the contrary, their charter says no compromises. Islamic land has to be cleared of Israel. No deal is valid. No compromise is valid. Hezbollah charter says the same thing. So why is the West talking about two-state solution? Did Palestinians ever say, if you give us a state, we'll leave you alone and we'll be happy? I don't remember hearing that.
No.
One more, couple of more observations.
Take your time, my friend.
Anyone
this is
who suffers from thank you. Anyone who suffers from Israel derangement syndrome, which seems to be every bit as hard or harder than Trump derangement syndrome these days.
No kidding.
Travel there. Don't boycott Israel. Travel there. Talk to Israelis. Talk to Palestinians. Talk to Christian Arabs. Talk to Muslim Arabs. You will see that not all people are on the same page. You will experience incredible freedom of speech, freedom to say whatever you want. You want to call it genocide? Go for it. Tel Aviv was covered with pictures, with cartoons of Bibi. The last time I was there, calling him destroyer, demon, Satan. The whole Tel Aviv was covered. Jerusalem, the opposite. You say what you want, you're not going to be prosecuted. But go see it for yourself before you use intellectually lazy terms like genocide, apartheid, and all that. These words don't mean anything. Just like the words global pandemic didn't really mean anything until you start talking about the issue.
If I could interrupt with a question.
Please.
There's a lot of misunderstanding here in the West from people who've never actually been to Israel, don't know anything about it other than what they see on Twitter or TikTok. But it doesn't look like an apartheid state to me. What I see when I really take a look at Israeli society, what I see is equal rights for all citizens, Arab and Jew. Tell me how the hell people have this idea that it's an apartheid state, and can you debunk that?
So I cannot fully debunk that because there is some truth to this. Okay, there is some truth. So if I live in the West Bank, I do have to go through checkpoints, and it's humiliating. I was born here. I'm a Palestinian. My ancestors are from here. Why should I be going through checkpoints? Why don't I have an airport? Why do I have to go to Jordan to fly internationally? Why am I treated somewhat on a social level, maybe as a second-class citizen? If I live in Gaza, why are all of my borders closed? The Egypt border is closed. Israel, why do I need a special permit to work and to get out? Why do I have limitations on how far I can go into the water, into the sea to fish? Why don't I have an airport? Now, the Israelis would say, well, it's because you blow things up every day, so we don't have a choice. And they say, well, we blow things up because you don't let us out. I guarantee you, if Palestinians said, you know what, we're going to put our honor, our religion, our holy jihad, our goals on hold for 5 years, and we're just going to focus on developing and making the most amazing thing out of Gaza possible, I guarantee you that Israelis would line up to go in there and shop and have fun and party, just like they did in Dubai and Bahrain as soon as they opened it, right? So if they did that, the restrictions would go away by themselves. Israelis don't like restrictions. It's an additional burden on their society. It's an additional expense dealing with it. Who wants to have checkpoints and restrictions? Israelis wish they didn't have to do it. Is that an ideal solution? No. But I don't have a guide. I don't have a book that will tell me what the ideal solution is under the circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, and what I'm told is that there are over 2 million Arab Israeli citizens, and that they have all the same rights that Jewish citizens do. They serve in the Knesset. They serve on the Supreme Court. Am I wrong? Am I misinformed?
If you go to Haifa, you're going to see beautiful restaurants, wealthy Arabs, mostly Christians, engineers, lawyers, architects, having great life. Akko, many successful merchants, the same as in Jerusalem. Many Arabs are doing very well. They have the same right. Now, are they fully integrated? We know Jews are insular. They came to themselves. You can see it in Brooklyn. You can see it there. Arabs have their own world. Jews have their own world, two separate cultures. Are you really going to feel the same? Are you really going to feel fully integrated as an Arab in Israeli society? Probably not. That's more of a cultural thing than a political thing. And sometimes it upsets me. You know, I walk on this beautiful beach in Tel Aviv and I see how it's segregated, like half a mile away. All the Hebrew speakers are here. All the Arabic speakers are here. I don't think they choose to mix. And it's not an apartheid, but
it's not forced segregation,
no,
right?
No,
it's more of a cultural thing, but it's not the government saying you can use this part of the beach and you stay over there, right?
Absolutely. So it's like our Chinatown. Oh, let's say Chinese people prefer to be there. Nobody's forcing. Yes, they seem to be choosing it. But in terms of rights, in terms of doing very well for themselves when they choose to do, in terms of having certain benefits, you know, I once went to Tel Aviv University at a lecture, or if you go to a hospital, it looks like 75% of the doctors and nurses are Arabs. 75% of the law students are Arabs. All these girls that are trying to be, you know, I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to make it. I don't know what benefits they have. I don't know if they have affirmative action, but there's a lot of opportunities. If you're an Arab in Israel, and if you want to do well economically, financially, the world is your oyster. Nobody will stop you. If nothing else, you're going to be an object of admiration. And
you know, I mean, women in Gaza can't do that. I don't think they are allowed to go to law school. So that leads me to the question, then, why don't you see more people from Gaza and Judea and Samaria integrating and folding into Israeli society? It seems like a much better life is possible there.
Well, they do have a status, right? It's not Israel, and it's not an independent state. So it's West Bank, and, you know, at some point it needs to be resolved one way or the other. right? They don't have citizenship, so it's a problem. They
right.
cannot. I think there have been some changes lately where it's much easier for them to travel, but still, they're not fully integrated. The question is, do they want to be integrated? Do they want to become citizens? So in Arab society, especially in Muslim society, honor is a big thing. Do I want to carry a Jewish passport, an Israeli passport, or I'm going to be disgusted by holding it in my hands? I don't know. Right. So, but Israeli Arabs are formally fully integrated with work, with businesses, with schools. They are as integrated as they want to be. When I came from Russia to Israel, I also felt completely segregated for many years. And I felt like I was a second-class citizen. It took years for things to change. The problem, if I was an Arab, it would be harder for me. Hey, I was born here. Why do I feel like I'm segregated? But it seems like they have no problem. They have their huge communities, Arab communities. I don't know if I'm feeling bad for them for no reason. I don't know if they feel what I think they feel.
You know, I'm curious to learn more about your story and why you left Russia to go to Israel and when. When did you go there?
So we moved in 1991, and it was mostly economic immigration. It wasn't really religious. The borders opened, and that's what people were doing.
I see. So you weren't one of the refuseniks, right? You just left after the fall of the Soviet Union, right? Like so many
I never
did.
experienced any anti-Semitism in Russia. If nothing else, expectations were high. You must be smart. You must be this because you're Jewish. I know my ancestors experienced it. I never experienced anything. So I cannot complain about that.
And so you just went for economic opportunity, and you get there and you find out that at least in the early 90s, I've heard a lot about that the newly arrived Russians were treated like second-class citizens, and they couldn't find work, and they were living in ghettos. And I understand that's all been worked out, but those years in the early 90s were tough.
Yeah, and you know, I was 12 back then, right? So I hear bullying happens here in schools. I wasn't bullied so much as ignored, like I don't exist by local kids, and they're making fun of your accent. And maybe we deserved to be treated as second-class citizens because of how grumpy Russians look, how much grayness they bring to an otherwise happy place, and engineers were sweeping the streets in 100-degree heat, physicists and doctors and teachers, and that's what they were doing. Yeah, and that took a while. And unlike America, there is no feel sorry for me, give me some racial justice. It doesn't work. You're going to suffer for a decade like all the others, like Iraqis, Moroccans, Persians, like everyone else suffered before you until you integrate. And even now, when I go back and I complain, what's the big deal? Who cares?
I want to let Rick jump in with some questions here.
You know, we talk about Gaza on our shows. Sometimes I have call-ins. Some people call in and they focus so much on the images they're seeing online. They say, Rick, it's all the dead babies and they're killing all these children. Can you give us some of your perspective on that social media aspect of this war, the information war, I guess, if you will, and the way those images are being used to, I guess, maybe illustrate or make people understand, or maybe on the other side, manipulate people?
Sure. So first of all, Israelis are idiots, okay? They're posting TikTok videos. They're posting TikTok videos of themselves dancing, being clowns in Gaza, treating it like it's some kind of joke to raise their own morale.
You mean the IDF soldiers?
Yeah,
I've seen
keep
some
it
of
to
those
yourself.
Selfies and stuff that
Yeah.
seem
Keep
really
it to
inappropriate.
yourself. Yeah, keep it to yourself. Don't post it to the world. It makes you look really heartless, really bad if that's not the intent. So total idiots. I would ban it. Unnecessary, bad for PR. That's number one. Yes, dead children, and Lori allowed me to make parallels with COVID. Dead children looks terrible. I mean, there's no way around it. It doesn't matter why and how, and it doesn't. Just like a person on the incubator during COVID, and then you're not getting vaccinated. If we just take all the other stuff out, it looks bad. Yes, and they know it, and they fully leverage it. They fully leverage that image, even though I know 100% for sure that they use innocent citizens as human shields. And they store weapons in hospitals and in schools. And they put Kalashnikovs in baby cribs. And every other house is like a weapon depot. And RPGs are in every house and anti-tank missiles. But images of innocent children, by the way, who are going to be brainwashed anyway and turned into martyrs, but images of innocent children is the most painful and the most compelling image any person can see, or for sure any woman could see. I mean, how could you not? Right? Like, why am I dying? What did I do? If I'm a 4-year-old child, I don't care what you guys are fighting and what you're doing. Why am I dying?
Breaks my heart.
How do you think martyrdom factors into this? As I look at this as someone from the outside, I see martyrdom used not just by suicide bombers, but it appears to me that these children are being sacrificed, that civilians are being sacrificed, and the images of these sacrifices are then being used for propaganda purposes, which is very difficult for people in the West to understand. To me, as I've tried to study this, I see a different culture, a different religion. I see martyrdom elevated to a status of it's seen in a positive light, a passage into the afterlife without even which even expunges you of any kind of guilt for any sin that you may have committed previous to that. It's just instant admission into an eternal afterlife. Can you speak to that culture? I know that you're not Palestinian, but you've certainly studied many aspects of this, and how is that coming to bear here that people in the West just don't understand?
So luckily, guys, we don't have to speculate. They tell us exactly how they feel about it. There are plenty of interviews of prisoners, of women who it's an ultimate act of heroism. It's viewed very positively, not by everyone, but by enough people. There was just another interview a few days ago where one of the leaders of Hamas said 1.5 million people sacrificed themselves in Algiers before it was liberated for France. We are happy to die for our cause. Many women say the reason we have so many babies so that we can turn them into martyrs, to die and to meet in holy jihad and to meet Allah. This is not speculation. This is what they say. Now, this creates a significant advantage. You have one side, Israelis, who just want to party because they have the best parties in the world at any age. They just want to eat because they have the best food in the world and the most food in the world. They want to go to the beach and they want to have this hedonistic social lifestyle. And then you have the other side who is happy to die, who is happy to fight and have no problem sacrificing hundreds of thousands of people. And I think this gives a significant advantage to Hamas. Specifically, I don't think they will ever surrender. This is incompatible. Surrendering would be completely incompatible with who they are and what their goal is. It's much better to die until every last single person. I think Lori disappeared.
Yeah, she'll be back. She does that sometimes in the middle of the broadcast, I think, to make a little room for me to ask some questions. The use of children as human shields, is there, in your view, an element of martyrdom even there? Are the children being elevated to the status of martyr when they're being killed?
Well, resistance is a holy goal, right? So you almost have two religions. You have Islam and you have resistance to Israel. There's a reason why Osama bin Laden in his 9/11 letter specifically mentions Israel to be the reason. It's an Islamic land. We cannot understate the importance of this goal. So if my 20-year-old children, if I'm happy for 20-year-old children to blow themselves up instead of going to college, why can't I shield myself with 4-year-olds? Why not? What's a big deal?
Right.
Especially when half of my population are children anyway. So if I just shield myself with random people, half of them will be under 16.
And this martyrdom, I think, has been extended to people setting themselves on fire, as we've seen with this Aaron Bushnell, which to me also, it to me that seems like it's something sick, but people on the other side with the other point of view are trying to portray him, or they are portraying him as a hero. To me, that's horrific in itself as well. What's your view on what happened with that?
Okay, so I saw the whole video, right? Super disturbing. I don't know if you've seen. So in a way, it's much worse than martyrdom, because if I'm a Palestinian and I blow up a bus, at least I killed 50 Israelis. Okay. And I killed. This guy sets himself on fire. He did not save anyone. He did not kill anyone else. You could do so many other things to sacrifice. You want to go fight for Hamas? I don't know if it's allowed. Go for it. You want to raise money for Palestine? You want to go there to work with Red Cross? Do something. This ridiculous symbolic act is not heroism. It's the ultimate. I don't want to call it virtue signaling. I don't know what to call it. It's not heroism. He could have done a lot of things to help his cause, what he thought was right. His death was completely useless, disturbing, disgusting, and I think it was selfish toward his family and toward his friends to do something like this. Yeah.
At the risk of editorializing here myself, I see him as a victim of the propaganda, a victim of that ideology of martyrdom, where I see him as being someone who is being exploited. They don't care about him. They don't care about him as an individual. They don't care about his life, but they're sure using him to further their message, using his death as a vehicle to propagandize their plight and portray themselves as victims, when in fact, I agree, his death was an absolute waste, and he, in my view, is being exploited. Is that far off the mark in your estimation?
I don't think so. Also, the way he talks, are you telling me that somebody who was in an Air Force, who went through all the hoops to get there, someone who presents so clean-cut, is so serious, he's just a psycho? I can't dismiss him as some kind of psychologically unstable person. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was very calm and confident, and it's very alarming that an American soldier would do something like this. That's like more extreme than any martyrdom because at least they're trying to kill Israelis when they get killed. This is like completely.
It seems to me like there was some sort of psychological conditioning that took place, or indoctrination into a way of thinking. It concerns me, because if he's at that point, it makes me wonder how many others might be thinking along the same lines.
Yeah. It was very disturbing, and labeling him as a hero is even more disturbing.
Yes. I'm also concerned because I'm seeing a shift in the narrative that's coming out of a lot of the alternative media in particular, and even probably some of the podcasts that you've been a guest on at times, where I've seen analysts or pundits say that maybe they were in favor of a two-state solution, or they recognized Israel's right to exist before, but they've progressed now to a point where they're saying, no, Israel no longer has a place to exist. And I'm seeing like a lot of the prominent live streamers out there, and I think you kind of know who I'm talking about. I'm reluctant to even mention the names because I don't want to start a fight, right? But it's concerning me, because I've actually heard some of them say, no, I've changed my mind. Israel doesn't even have a right to exist anymore. Where do you think that this is coming from, or what's your take on that? And how are you dealing with it, given that you've been on some of these programs yourself as a guest?
Can I mention names?
Oh, you can if you want, sure.
Okay, thank you. So, it really strikes the chord with me, because, I really like Jimmy Dore. I really like Aaron Mate and Max Blumenthal. I like the Hill, and Brianna Joy. I don't always agree with her. I wish those people, and I really like Scott Ritter. I respect for who he is. I wish those people didn't take this one-sided Palestine no matter what. I'm not doing this with Israel. Israelis don't do this. It doesn't help. It may be getting you the clicks, the popularity, taking a very extreme position. But I wish they didn't cover with their audience this, like, oh, that's it. I'm just going to look in one angle, in one direction, no matter what. You're not supposed to be an advocate for Israel or for Palestine. And unfortunately, I've been watching Jimmy Dore almost every day, and I had to stop because, it's very hard for me. And I really like Aaron Mate and Max Blumenthal and many of these other guys, and it's hard for me to see one side. What is so Israel just randomly woke up one day on October 7th and decided to invade and go with tanks and air force? They had nothing better to do. That's what happened. I don't know.
And the impact from that, I think, is I see these highly influential people, what they're saying, it's having an impact in Canada, in the United States, in the West, and it's translating into hatred for Jewish people. I don't think that's an unfair statement. Are you concerned about it?
I am concerned. For the longest time, I was making fun of people who pull race card, who pull Jewish card, but it becomes harder and harder to avoid it because it seems to me that anti-Semitism is just like jealousy. No one ever admits to being jealous, and no one ever admits to being anti-Semitic. Now, I'm the last person to engage in whataboutism, but imagine if 30,000 Israelis were killed. Would there be protests every week? I don't think so. Who is going to protest for them?
There's a saying in our business, no Jews, no news. I mean, if it weren't the Jews waging a war, would the Western media care?
Well, we all talk about it, how millions of Arabs are being killed in that region. No one ever cares. Syria, Libya, Yemen, as the war has been going on, no one cares. And between that and between the comments, all the nasty comments we get, they're not jokes. Those comments are not jokes. That's what's on people's mind. They're full of the amount of hate. The type of messages I've been getting are way worse than anything Trump-related, masks and vaccines. It's much more extreme. I had no idea that that there's people here who care so much, that they have so much poison to unleash. I never imagined that. So
I can't imagine, Arkady, how you must feel. And when we have Jewish guests on the program, sometimes the comments in our own chat room shock me, And when you were on with Scott Ritter, you were viciously attacked in the chat room for no reason other than you're Jewish.
Well, Scott Ritter has an audience. First of all, he has a very big following, and he has an audience that looks at things a certain way, right? So, of course, those are selected people, and they're gonna. But the way that they attacked me, it was, it's surprising.
Made me sad. All of this makes me sad. I thought we had progressed since, America and Canada were both very anti-Semitic countries prior to World War II. After World War II, that eventually calmed down. Maybe it just went underground. But what I don't understand is how the young generation has become so racist and radicalized. Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, there's a very simple explanation that a lot of scholars put out there that's very convincing. It is the oppressed oppressor narrative. The young left wants to support the weak, whether it's trans community, whether it's BLM, whether it's Palestine. In this case, Palestine seemed to be the weaker side. So I don't think they would support Israel today if it was the weaker side. I don't think the students would be coming out to protect Israel. They really believe that it shouldn't exist. And you know what? Even if they're right, it was a mistake to create Israel. Let's just assume. How does it help today to say that? Right? I don't know. Now, I want to take us back to to one thing that people in the West trying to look away from. They don't want to label it as a religious conflict because they don't feel comfortable with that. They think it's a political conflict, but all roads, all arguments lead to the same thing. It is a religious conflict.
Absolutely.
If Israelis said today we're all converting to Islam, what would be the argument against Israel? Do you still want your land? Why? I'm a Muslim. Okay, it's a Muslim land. What do you want? How is that a land disagreement if the only reason you want your land is because I'm not a Muslim? It would be interesting if Israelis all decided to convert to Islam. Would that solve the problem? So I don't know.
Well, you'll never get the Muslims to convert to Judaism.
We wouldn't ask.
Sure.
We wouldn't ask. We wouldn't ask, and it wouldn't matter.
Right. Right. You know, Rick, I think a lot of this, and I'd like to get Arkady's thoughts. A lot of this strong anti-Israel sentiment. Do you think a lot of it is just because these kids are getting not only a slanted education in the universities, but also because they're getting their historical education from social media? They went to the TikTok School of History, and they really don't know much about the true history of the region and the previous wars and the conflicts, and they're just parroting what they hear their favorite influencers say. You know, I heard Max Blumenthal say this, and I heard Norm Finkelstein say that, and I heard Scott Ritter say this, and so they're just kind of parroting propaganda.
Is that for me?
Yeah, I think that's for you. I'd
That's
rather
for
hear
you.
From you than me.
Let me defend our
And
students.
you can chime in too, right?
Okay. Let me defend our students, okay? I'm going to try to defend. If you're a young, energetic student in a top school, you have the urge to do something good, to be a hero. And defending the weak, coming out in protests, this is a historical moment. This is your opportunity to be a hero and stand for the weak, for underprivileged, and as against colonialism and a branch of the U.S. I don't know if there is more to it than that. And people feel it gives them meaning, especially today in the era of loneliness than you and I, Lori, and Yurik, we didn't experience with social media, with isolation, with love and dating not being the same that they used to be, with social interactions. No, this is your opportunity to be in a large group, to chant and to feel really good about defending the weak. And people are dying no matter what, whether justifiably or not. People are dying every day, and it's a crisis, and there is no end to that crisis. So, yeah.
What do you think, Rick?
Well, I think that we're seeing this convergence that I've been talking about of the, some communists and some fascists or fascist elements and ideologies coming together. It's being accelerated through what we're seeing on social media, through these online influencers who are promoting these ideas. And when I say that, you're referring to the oppressed versus the oppressor narrative, which most people would associate with socialism or communism. But you're also seeing this ethno-nationalistic ideology coming from the Palestinians and this anti-colonialism narrative and way of thinking that comes from identity politics, which is also sort of on the left, but I would say it's also integrating very well into a fascistic mindset. It's bringing the people together because fascism also has roots in socialism. And so when you bring these things together, they fit very nicely. And when you overlay these anti-Semitic tropes where you're blaming virtually everything on the Jews, that becomes the scapegoat again, the easy scapegoat. The Jews are responsible for, they own all the banks. They're responsible for your oppression because they they're loaning you money at exorbitant interest rates. They're responsible for owning all the media, and you can't trust the media. And during the pandemic, trust in the media was undermined, right? And I think that the pandemic has really allowed the people promoting this convergence to accelerate all of that and to overlay this narrative of the elites, which was a word that I think they've just now flipped to using Zionist instead of elites. And what's a Zionist? That's the Jews and anybody that supports the Jews. It's a politically correct way of hating Jews, if you will. And all of this stuff really just goes all the way back to those old-fashioned anti-Semitic tropes that we've heard for generations and generations, and the protocols of the elders of Zion, and all of these old-fashioned things that led to the horrors of World War II and beyond.
Right, and they'd love to say that Israel controls the Congress. Israel controls President Biden. Israel controls Trudeau. That's the story. But that's the oldest. That's the oldest Nazi propaganda in the book. That's what Hitler used to say about FDR.
and they'll say that the Jews control the pharmaceutical industry, and then because they control the pharmaceutical industry, they're responsible for the thing in the arm, and therefore they want to depopulate the whole earth, and it's all the fault of the Jews. It's everything. Everything gets blamed on the Jews. And Arkady, maybe you can comment on this. I see that narrative being used by the opponents of the United States, especially right now, because let's face it, we are at war, and I don't blame anybody on the other side for looking out for their own interests, but I see this narrative being used as an anti-capitalist, anti-American narrative that it connects both Israel and the United States, isolates them both from the international community through this narrative, because the United States is trying to stand with Israel. By extension, you'll hear phrases like Jewmerica and that kind of prejudice and bigotry overlaid into this anti-Americanism, which again, some people might interpret that as being communistic. Other people might say that that's the fascists coming. I call it communo-fascism. It's the convergence of the extremes from both of those sides coming together to form this neo ideology, however you want to describe it, but that's what I see going on. And ultimately, I say, if Israel falls, the United States is in peril because of that connection. That's why the United States has so much at stake here. It's the U.S. influence in the Middle East gone, the U.S. dollar being supported by petroleum, the petrodollar. Israel's gone, U.S. influence in the Middle East is gone. The dollar collapses, the economy is compromised, maybe even the country breaks up as a result of that. America, as we know it, diminishes or disappears as well and gets reconstituted into something else that honestly is probably going to be taken over by some it'll be reconstituted in a way that is probably less of a threat to the rest of the world, because it won't be powerful anymore, because the economy will be neutered.
Allow me to be anti-Semitic for a moment, if I may.
Sure. Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Some of those conspiracy theories that Jews control the banking and control the media and they control the pharma, some of these things are true. Now, does it mean that Jews should be killed? They should be put in concentration camp? No, of course not. But, the last time I went to Israel, there was a huge line outside the Adidas shop for Kanye West shoes. And I'm like, wow. All these people are standing in line. So I started came up to a random guy, and I'm like, are you guys not boycotting Kanye West? And why should we boycott him? Well, he said Jews control the Hollywood. And he's like, okay, so which part is not true? That's the Israeli mindset, okay? They accept that there's reasons that they're being hated. It doesn't mean that they should be killed. They can be insular. They could act like they're better than others. They could call other people goyim. They do keep a lot of money in many places for legitimate or non-legitimate reason. People like Bernie Madoff and Sam Bankman-Fried, they don't help. They don't help the image. Okay? Doesn't mean they deserve to be killed, but there is a reason for hate. And when you put on top of that what's going on in Gaza, the people who already want to hate, they can put these two things together and amplify their hate. So
That
and
does
Jeffrey
make sense.
Epstein. And Jeffrey Epstein. Should I
Right.
should
Oh,
I
yeah.
continue? Yeah.
Yeah.
The fact that all the porn sites were purchased by one rabbi who happened to be Jewish, the Pornhub and everything. These things like that don't help the image. So
Yeah,
Very
but that's
true.
not to say that the Jews control everything.
No.
You know, it's just, certain aspects of certain industries they're prominent in, or maybe even dominant, just as you could pick any other ethnicity, any other group of people and say, well, like here in where I live, there's a Korean convenience store association. They control a large portion of the convenience store industry where I live. But
Let me
it doesn't
address-
mean I hate them.
yeah, let me address
I
Tyler
just go
McConnell's
pick up a
comment.
soda.
Yeah, this is at 30,000 people dead, 100 children a day are dying. This is the same as saying 100 people are dying from COVID, let's lock everything down. It's a similar argument. It's oversimplifying the reality. It's virtue signaling. It's playing on emotion without providing any constructive, intellectually honest solution or discussion. If we were in 1940s and 1950s, this would have turned much uglier probably for Palestinians now. I don't think Truman thought Truman was trying to minimize civilian casualties when he dropped 2 bombs on civilians only, not even trying to hit any military targets.
No
This is a different
warning.
world.
No warning before we dropped atomic bombs on Japan, before we decimated the cities of Germany. No warning was given.
100% civilians, just to make a point that we need to bring you to your knees, because that's what needed to be done. That's what it took. And he said later, and the pilots, even up till today, the pilot says, I never left a minute of sleep over this, because that's what needed to be done. Different world, but
Speaking of World War II, we talk about this a lot on the show because I'm a historian and I don't get my history from TikTok. I actually read books.
shame on you.
I know. What a lot of people don't understand, I've written a lot about the Nazis in Ukraine, the Ukrainian nationalists who joined forces with Nazi Germany to fight against Russia in World War II. But it was the same thing in Arabia, or what's now called Palestine. Palestine was mandatory British Palestine at the time, but most of the Arab world was literally allied with Nazi Germany, with Hitler, as I'm sure you well know.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me, and I think it ties into where we are today, in fact, I know it does, is that after World War II, Germany was denazified, right? It was illegal to possess Nazi paraphernalia, propaganda, swastika flags, etc. Everything was outlawed, and it's how they got that poison out of their systems, so that Germany is now, one of the superpowers again of the world. But that didn't happen in Arabia. There was no denazification process. Those books were not outlawed. There was a huge Nazi propaganda campaign in the Middle East. And that's why Mein Kampf is still like number 6 bestseller in Palestine. You often see Nazi paraphernalia, Nazi propaganda, and you have, like we've shown on the show, you've got clothing stores named after Hitler in Gaza City.
So that's another.
They think he's cool.
Yeah, that's another huge thing. The amount of brainwashing that's going on there from kindergarten everywhere from textbooks. The brainwashing against Israel is intertwined in every subject: math, biology, chemistry, everywhere. Now think about how easy it is to brainwash people here to do all kinds of things they shouldn't be doing, from cosmetic surgeries to not coming out of the house or walking around in masks for 2 years, whatever, just random examples. Imagine how little effort it took. Imagine if you're being brainwashed by everyone and everything. Now, I've been to West Bank. I haven't been to Gaza. Many walls have pictures of martyrs, big pictures of martyrs saying, glory and heroes and whatever. When you're surrounded by this, I mean, you're a product of that society. So if that is not addressed, there will be no solution. There's just zero chance for peace if the brainwashed is not taken out of that equation.
Right. And, Hamas came out of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood was directly tied to Hitler, to the Nazis in World War II. We also, last 2 weeks ago on the show, we were talking about the Grand Mufti, Haj Amin al-Husani, very enthusiastic Nazi collaborator who was the leader of the Arab world and Waffen-SS divisions in North Africa. And to this day, they still look upon him as a hero in much of Arabia and certainly in Palestine. He was the mentor of Yasser Arafat, right, who created this whole Palestinian narrative in 1964. And like Rick was talking about communo-fascism, this coming together of the fascists and the communists, it's the damnedest thing to me. It was one of those strange Cold War phenomenons that I hate to see repeating in the 21st century because it was dumb the first time, when the communists during the Cold War allied with their former enemies in Palestine because Israel was allied with the United States. And it all just seems to be history repeating to me. Do you see that, Arkady?
Lori, I am not as well versed in that side of history, and I'm very hesitant to blame what's going on now on Hitler and on Nazism when they tell us what they're doing and why. It's Islam, it's holy war, it's holy resistance. The land belongs to us and only to us. So if Hitler was somehow mixed into all this 80 years ago for a while, that's fine. But I don't think we need to speculate, or if we only listen to what they tell us, to what they want, there are no secrets. And that's why there will be no solution.
Well, I want to play you a clip here of Benjamin Netanyahu, sorry. He often refers to Hamas as Nazis, and you see that quite a bit in the Israeli propaganda. Let's listen to what he has to say real quick.
Even those in the south say they do not feel safe. French President Emmanuel Macron has said there is, quote, no justification for the ongoing bombing of civilians. All over the world, you've seen protesters who are calling for an end to civilian deaths in Gaza. Can you win this war without global support?
We will win this war because we have no other choice. There's no life for us. There's no future for us and our neighbors if we allow the axis of terror led by Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and their minions to dominate. We have an alliance for peace on the other side. It includes Israel, the United States, the moderate Arab states, and the rest of the civilized world. Now, it's a question, who wins? We have to win. There's confusion in many parts of the world. I have to say, not in the United States. I'm glad to see that the majority of the American people support Israel. They understand that we're fighting the just battle of civilization against barbarism. But those who protest for Hamas, you're protesting for sheer evil. There are a lot of misguided people out there who don't know the facts. You're talking to people who deliberately targeted civilians, who raped and murdered women, who beheaded men, who burnt babies alive, who kidnapped little babies and Holocaust survivors, you name it. These are the people that you're supporting. Now, you cannot, it's like in World War II, the Allies are fighting the Nazis, okay? Chancellor Kohl of Germany said that Hamas are the new Nazis. So imagine now, the Allies are fighting the Nazis. They've invaded France after they were attacked by the Nazis. They go into the cities of Germany. Obviously, the Nazis are fighting within civilian quarters, and civilians get killed. In fact, many of them were killed. Millions were killed. Now, who do you protest against? Do you protest against the Nazis, or do you protest against the Allies? And what these people are doing is protesting for sheer evil. That's wrong. By the way, it's a condemnation. It's an indictment of higher education in some of our universities.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.
Or the NBC News gal couldn't get a word in edgewise. She's like, Mr. Prime Minister, up. Speaking of NBC News, there's a new poll out this week showing that some 82% of Americans stand with Israel, continue to support Israel, despite the civilian casualties that we see coming out of Gaza and the massive resistance that we see and the protests in our streets. But, this week we also saw President Biden give his State of the Union address, where, as usual with President Biden, when his lips are moving, he's lying. He's trying to play both sides. On the one hand, he says we stand with Israel, and on the other hand, we're going to do all that we can to help the Palestinians. And if you missed it, just to refresh your memory, here's a quick clip of him addressing the Gaza war in the State of the Union.
On October 7th, with a massacre by a terrorist group called Hamas, as you all know. 1,200 innocent people, women and girls, men and boys, slaughtered after enduring sexual violence. The deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And 250 hostages taken. Here in this chamber tonight are families whose loved ones are still being held by Hamas. I pledge to all the families that we will not rest until we bring every one of your loved ones home. We also We will also work around the clock to bring home Evan and Paul, Americans being unjustly detained by the Russians and others around the world. Israel has the right to go after Hamas. Hamas ended this conflict by releasing hostages, laying down arms, could end it by releasing the hostages, laying down arms, and surrendering those responsible for October 7th. But Israel has Israel has a added burden because Hamas hides and operates among the civilian population like cowards, under hospitals, daycare centers, and all the like. Israel also has a fundamental responsibility, though, to protect innocent civilians in Gaza. This war has taken a greater toll on innocent civilians than all previous wars in Gaza combined. More than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, most of whom are not Hamas. Thousands and thousands of innocents, women and children, girls and boys, also orphaned. Nearly 2 million more Palestinians under bombardment or displacement. Homes destroyed, neighborhoods in rubble, cities in ruin. Families without food, water, medicine. It's heartbreaking. I've been working nonstop to establish an immediate ceasefire that would last for 6 weeks to get all the prisoners released, all the hostages released, to get the hostages home and ease the intolerable and humanitarian crisis and build toward an enduring, something more enduring. The United States has been leading international efforts to get more humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Tonight, I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground. A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day. And Israel must do its part. Israel must allow more aid into Gaza to ensure humanitarian workers aren't caught in the crossfire. And they're announcing they're going to have a crossing in northern Gaza. For the leadership of Israel, I say this: humanitarian assistance cannot be a secondary consideration or a bargaining chip. Protecting and saving innocent lives has to be a priority. As we look to the future, the only real solution to the situation is a two-state solution over time. And I say this as a lifelong supporter of Israel. My entire career, no one has a stronger record with Israel than I do. I challenge any of you here. I'm the only American president of Israel in wartime. But there is no other path that guarantees Israel's security and democracy. There is no other path that guarantees Palestinians can live in peace with peace and dignity. And there's no other path that guarantees peace between Israel and all of its neighbors, including Saudi Arabia, with whom I'm talking. Creating stability in the Middle East also means containing the threat posed by Iran. That's why I built a coalition of more than a dozen countries to defend international shipping and freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. I've ordered strikes to degrade the Houthi capability and defend U.S. forces in the region. As Commander-in-Chief, I will not hesitate to direct further measures to protect our people and our military personnel.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.
Any reaction to what Biden had to say there? He still called for that two-state solution, which I see an increasing number of people saying that's not really an option.
Yeah, so it's not easy to be Biden in this situation. He has to play both sides. He already is losing the support of the extreme left with all the protests, and he has to appease both sides. But yeah, that's very interesting. Two-state solution is the only solution. According to whom? Did you ask the other side? That's what they want. Now, Scott Ritter, when we argued, he told me that once you have a two-state solution, the terrorists will go to the fringe, just like ISIS did. I'm not so sure about that, because the percentage of Hamas, their force, their financial support from Qatar, from Iran, the weaponry, the determination, the amount of support they have today, I'm not so sure that they will go to the fringe. More importantly, can Israel, given its size and its proximity, take that chance, take that risk? I don't think so.
But Ritter has just come out and has said that he no longer supports a two-state solution. I don't know if you're aware. You didn't see that? Yeah, he says he no longer believes that Israel has a right to exist.
Okay.
Maybe we'll have to get him back on to explain further what he means by that, but that seems to me to be pretty extreme.
So what is his solution?
Beyond what I just shared with you, I don't know, because I just saw the quote and a brief caption. That was about maybe a week, maybe two. I lose a little track of time, but just recently. So he's shifted his position, which really surprised me.
Let me, if he thinks of a one-state solution, let me explain why that's never going to work. So if the Jews want to retain the majority and keep it the Jewish state, that will never be equal and democratic state. I can't imagine how the Arabs would accept this fully. And if it becomes a fully democratic, equal state with a majority of Arabs, Jews will never feel secure. And it's only a matter of time before they start getting prosecuted, discriminated, and subjugated. And I don't want to hear about any stories of how Jews were treated so well in other Arab countries. There were periods, very distinct, very specific, short-lived periods where they were treated very well, but that ended really badly for them everywhere, without exception, in the Arab world, everywhere.
Yeah, and I saw during Biden's address a couple of members of the squad holding up the lasting ceasefire now.
I saw that, yeah.
Panels or whatever you call those.
What's
things.
her name? I forgot. The black lady. What is her name?
Rashida Tlaib?
No. What is her name? She was wearing a nice dress too. And she was waving this. I just had one question to her.
Yeah.
Does it include ceasefire from randomly stopping in the freeway and opening fire on cars, running over people on bus stops, blowing things up, stabbing people randomly on the street? Does ceasefire include that too?
Yeah. You were talking about Ilhan Omar,
No,
Ayanna Presley,
no,
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez,
No,
Rashida
no,
Tlaib.
no. Black lady. I have her here. What is her name? She's also in the Democratic Party. She's a senator. What the hell is her name?
Well, maybe when Lori comes back, she can help us with it.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
not really sure who you're referring to. But do you think Biden is sincere in what he said during that speech? Because on the floor, he was caught on a hot mic saying that he and Netanyahu need to have a come to Jesus moment or meeting. My take on that was that, and I'm very interested in what you have to say on this. I think he said it on purpose. I think he knew his mic was hot. I think that was a message for the people. Some people saying, "Oh, that's a way to get a message to Netanyahu." No, if he wants to talk to Netanyahu, he picks up the phone. He can talk to him pretty much anytime he wants. So there's no need to send him a message that way. That was for the public, because I think the U.S., Israel, they're losing the public relations war. I think that they have a big PR problem where the public views Palestine as the big victim here, and he needs to be seen as standing up to Netanyahu sort of in the background, while up front he's saying he's supportive. So he's trying to play both sides there and shore up support in what is an election year. I think that was all theater and was done on purpose. What are your thoughts?
Rick, I think we will never know what Biden really thinks. He's a very experienced politician. He says what he's supposed to say to stand behind his party. Of course, he will try to please all sides. There's no other way here. And the elections are coming. I don't think we know what's on his mind, if anything. I think his whole speech was full of platitudes, as often State of the Union is, and that's expected. So I wouldn't put too much. I wouldn't try to read what he really thinks or what he really wants based on the State of the Union address.
I can.
So. You can?
I know what he's thinking. He's thinking about he's thinking that he's behind in the polls by 3 to 5 points to Trump. And he's worried about Michigan. He's worried about Minnesota. He's worried about losing key swing states. Those numbers count. I mean, these polls are within the margin of error. It's that close. And speaking of Donald Trump,
do you think that
go
was
ahead.
accurate? Do you think that he said that stuff on purpose on the mic? Do you think?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I'm asking Lori.
That's a good question, Rick. I don't know, because Biden is so out of it half the time. It honestly might have been just a mistake, because he's always making slips of the tongue. Might not have been aware of the camera, the hot mic, and I heard one of his handlers kind of lean into him and say, "Sir, there's a hot mic." Shh, shh, shh. So I wonder if he actually meant to say that or not. You can't tell with Joe Biden.
No.
Let
me beat up on Israel a little bit more, and then contradict myself too.
Go right ahead.
You're
I know nothing
really
about
this debating stuff with it's a
I can debate with myself, right? So
there you go.
I can debate. So without knowing anything about Israel, okay? If I see a society where people are happy to blow up, to die, time after time, which is quite unique, even in the Arab world, you don't see too much of that, right? Taliban don't really do that, right? ISIS didn't really do that. They did all kinds of barbarism. They weren't just killing themselves. If you see people using their children as human shields, if they did whatever they did on October 7th, does Israel have a role in creating that monster over the years? Must have some role. Now, you could say, well, this way you can justify any mass murder in America. You can take any mass murderer and say, well, it's society's fault for creating him. I understand, but does Israel have a role in creating that sick, society where people are brainwashed and where they're doing whatever they're doing. I don't know.
That's what they say, of course, is that since, 1948, that Israel created this monster. Do you think that's true?
Well, you mean the UN created the monster? Maybe they made a
Right.
fundamental mistake. I think that's why Putin really supports Russia, supports Palestine. Say you guys made a mistake, terrible mistake in how you divided the Arab region in 1948, and you have been reluctant to admit. And just like you're doubling down on sanctions on different countries, on all of your other policies that don't work, you keep doubling down on something that doesn't work. In the ideal world where people talk instead of sitting in their own partisan cubicles, it would be nice to hear what solutions Putin would have proposed. It would be so nice to hear. Don't have to agree with him, but he settled a horrible war in Chechnya somehow and turned Chechnya to their best friend. It would be nice to hear what he has to say about this.
It would. And isn't it interesting that Putin himself is kind of in the same position that Netanyahu is? He too is accused of genocide. He too is accused of being a war criminal. The ICC literally has an arrest warrant for him. And, they say that he's doing in Ukraine what Netanyahu's doing in Gaza. Your thoughts?
So I really don't like this hypocrisy from Russians, because I've been on a few Russian podcasts and they say that NATO Ukraine is an existential threat to them, and that's why they started this whole huge operation, which is like 1,000 times bigger than whatever is going on in Gaza. And I don't care what they say on the news and what Zelensky says. There's no comparison in the amount of weapons, the amount of casualties, whatever. But for Russia to say that that was an existential threat, but what happened to Israel like 5 miles away from where Israelis live, that's not an existential threat? That sounds like a double standard to me.
I have to agree, because the Ukraine border is a long way from Moscow. It's a long way from St. Petersburg. It's a long way from Siberia. It's hardly and it took Putin 8 years, I might remind everyone, to do anything about the slaughter in the Donbass, the genocide of 14,000 people who were being shelled, who were being killed. What took him so long? There are a lot of different reasons, but once he finally did make his move, he did. He moved in pretty hard. And go ahead.
No, I expected him to say, guys, I don't like seeing dead children and innocent civilians and this, but I know where you're coming from. I'm kind of in the same boat, maybe even in not such a bad boat as you guys are. So I feel what you guys are feeling. I expected more empathy, but because Russia and America have to be in opposite no matter what is going on, so I guess he has to take the opposite side. He has to take the, not to mention alliances with Iran, China. So, a different edge of the same world. Of the same case.
Does it seem to you that Putin has thrown a 25-year good relationship and alliance with Israel, whom he said, they were unconditional allies in the global struggle against terrorism? After October 7th, it seems that changed very quickly. It took him 10 days to call Netanyahu with his condolences, and Russia's been, sort of wishy-washy on this whole thing, and meeting with Hamas. Just had another meeting last week with Hamas and Fatah leaders there in Russia. I'm just curious what you think about the discarding of that alliance. Do you think that the Putin-Netanyahu bromance is over?
No chance. Putin is way too shrewd of a diplomat. It's not all black and white with him. I would like to draw a parallel between Russia and Turkey. Both are great powers. Both are big countries with a lot of population. No matter how much Turkey smacks on Israel in public, the flights are still working. The trade is still working. There is no boycotting. These people, Russia and Turkey and Israel, they have to please a lot of different sides. Erdogan is meeting with Zelensky. They met this week. They have to work. They have to work the room. They have to play the political game. And Russia has to have a relationship with Israel, with Turkey, with Iran, with China, with Syria, with maybe with Brazil. It's a complicated world. Putin is not the one who is going to cancel you because you did something that they didn't like. He's much more mature. He's not playing high school games. He made it clear in his interview with Tucker Carlson. He's ready to talk. He's ready to negotiate. Just because he doesn't like something that Netanyahu says or this, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Yeah, relationships have bumps, but there are many ties. There's a visa-free entry between Russia and Israel, right? There's so many Russians who live in Israel, Russian Jews.
That's right.
They're double citizens. The same with
and
Ukraine.
they vote. They're voting right now in the Russian election. You know, I think the 2018 election, Putin was very popular over there. He won by, I think, 73% of the vote in 2018. So I'm very curious to see how the Russian Israelis will vote because a lot of them feel betrayed by Putin after October 7th.
They shouldn't feel that way. That alone shouldn't determine their vote. And you know what I like in Israel, when I talk to different people, they're divided about Ukraine too. Even the Ukrainians themselves and Russians, there's a healthy debate. People are not on the same page, which is good. They're not like all thinking. And it was like nice to see that people don't look at it as black and white. It's a complicated situation. And the same with Gaza and Israel. Anybody who says genocide, apartheid, or the other way around, I mean, they're just oversimplifying things that are inherently not simple. We wish they were simple, but they're not. And everyone has their own truth. A soldier who is defending his country while taking off his work and leaving his family, going to fight in Gaza, has his own reality. The children in Gaza who have nothing to do with what's going on have their own reality. Biden has his own reality, his own goals. And Netanyahu has his own reality. He's a leader. He has to show strength. He has to show to other countries, do not F with us, or this is what's going to happen to you because of all the threats that are coming from Hezbollah, from Iran. We're going to wipe you out. They're constantly saying this. We're going to wipe you out. Who talks like this? And who's going to stop them if they really decide to gang up and try to wipe Israel out? I don't know. This causes a lot of stress.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually hearing talk now of the United States pulling all of our aid to Israel because of this tremendous pressure on the government to do so. And over in Israel, I watch a lot of Israeli commentators and podcasts, and they're starting to have serious conversations about surviving and fighting this war on their own without our help. They seem to be bracing for impact, that the United States may no longer be that reliable ally.
So they've been ramping up production of ammunition. I don't know if they can produce enough to maintain a significant large-scale war for such a long period of time. But yeah, there are voices that say we cannot depend on America and be at the mercy of whatever they tell us, and they decide that this is just not sustainable. So they need to wake up before it's too late and be able to stand for themselves, at least when it comes to ammunition.
You know, I honestly think that if Joe Biden somehow manages to win 4 more years and this war drags on, that could actually happen. That we just might pull back our aid for Israel significantly. But let's talk about some of the other presidential candidates. Because if Donald Trump wins the next election, I don't think our support for Israel would be in jeopardy. You know, Trump loves to say, I'm the biggest pro-Israel president in American history, and he probably was. I'd say that he was. And just to refresh your memory, because a lot's happened in the last few months, I want to show you what Trump said on the night of October 7th.
And I stood proudly with our friend and ally, the state of Israel, and I will do it again. You heard about today. The Hamas terrorist invasion. I mean, when you think about, and what do you think of Hamas? What do you think? Do you know about Hamas? The terror invasion of Israeli territory and the murder of Israeli soldiers and citizens is an act of savagery that must be and will be crushed and avenged, has to be crushed. Israel's at war and the United States has to support Israel. We have to support Israel. There's been no better president for Israel than me. And nobody loves Israel more than the evangelical Christians, I will tell you that. This war happened for two reasons. The United States giving Iran $6 billion. How about that deal? We get 5 terrorists, they get 5 terrorists, or we get 5 prisoners, they get 5 prisoners. Call them whatever you want. 5 and 5, okay. I'm sure it wasn't a good deal because, like in the case of Russia, one of the people they got back was the leading arms dealer in the history of the world. Okay? Leading arms dealer in the history of the world. He's going out now purchasing arms for Russia. Very good trade they made. I'm sure our trade was likewise. But they added one little caveat. Plus we get, for them, $6 billion. So we get 5, and they get 5. Sounds good. And they also get $6 billion. And our country's perceived weakness and an incompetent and corrupt leader, Joe Biden, who's laughed at all over the world. He's laughed at all over the world. People can't believe this is happening. President Xi, who is so smart, so many of these people, they have a meeting and they say, this can't be happening. The guy doesn't have a clue. And I predicted the war. A lot of the newspapers, thank you very much, fellas, they've been very generous to me. I predicted war in Israel immediately after it was announced that Joe Biden gave the $6 billion to Iran. They got so much money. At this time, Israel and the United States need a very strong partnership and leadership. You got to have strong leaders. You don't have strong leaders, it doesn't matter how many army tanks you have. In addition to the billions of dollars given to Hamas, top funder Iran, Joe Biden restored hundreds of millions of dollars to the very corrupt Palestinian entities. He gave them hundreds of millions of dollars. Many people didn't even know it. Wonder what deal he made. Joe Biden betrayed Israel. He betrayed our country. As president, I will once again stand with Israel, and we will cut off the money to Palestinian terrorists on day one. We'll cut it off on day one. And Biden and Obama were terrible to Israel because they begged him. Bibi Netanyahu came here, begged Obama, begged him, please, sir. I mean, he literally, the way he was talking, it was the craziest thing. He was begging him, don't do the Iran nuclear deal. I ended it, and if we had our administration, we would have had a deal with Iran already. It would have been a good deal. They wouldn't have had a nuclear weapon. Now they're 3 months away from having a nuclear weapon. And once they have a nuclear weapon, the conversations become much more difficult. This guy, this poor, sad sack of a president that we have, will lead us into World War III, 100%. I've made and I hope that's a prediction that I'm wrong on. But we've never been closer. We've never been closer than we are right now. And he tweaks the wrong people at the wrong time. He says the wrong thing at the wrong time. If he says anything at all, he's not respected at all. It's a disgrace. They spend all their money with the DOJ on screwing opponents. That's what they do. That's all they're good at. You are closer to World War III, and I can say this, if I'm elected, I'm the only one that can say it, you will never have World War III. You will not have World War III. Less than 4 years ago, we had the historic Abraham Accords, which everyone said, when will you get your Nobel Peace Prize? Should have. I had 5 things I should have gotten a Nobel Prize, but I said, I'm not going to get one. They gave one to Obama when he got elected. 2 weeks later, they got elected. He didn't. Why did I get it? Does anyone know? He didn't even do anything. He didn't do too much after that either. But today, think of it. So just a short time ago, we did the historic Abraham Accords, and today we have the exact opposite, a major attack on Israel. What a difference a president makes, right? What a difference a president makes. As president, I also kept my promise to recognize Israel's eternal capital and opened the American embassy in Jerusalem and got it built. I actually got it built. It's going to cost $2 billion. I did it for $500,000. You know that story. I also recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, something that they've been working on for 58 years. They never got it done. I got it done. And I withdrew the United States from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal, and we were in a position to make an unbelievable deal. And these guys didn't do anything. I kept saying, are they doing anything? They didn't do anything. We saved America once before, and I am the only candidate in this race that will save America once again. We're going to save America because we have no choice. We have no choice. So here's just some of what we'll do when we become, we, all of us together, because this is a we effort. We become the 47th President of the United States of America. I will totally obliterate the deep state, stop the weaponization of our government, and overhaul the corrupt FBI and the very corrupt DOJ from the ground up. And we're back. Again, do you think he's sincere in all of that?
So as often, Rick, I really appreciate, if you strip all the me, if you just take all that away, he says essentially exactly what one of my Palestinian clients, a big supporter of Israel, says. What you're doing now is useless. If you don't cut the head of the snake, which is Iran, I know it's hard, I know it's a lot to ask, but if you don't cut the head of the snake, all of the other efforts are completely pointless. It's only a matter of time before the tentacles of that snake will grow back. Now, one other point I wanted to make, and I think the show Fauda makes this cynical point very well. If there is an effort to make peace, there's going to be significant resistance to it for one simple reason. Resistance is a huge industry. It's one of the largest industry in Palestine. How do you get money? How do you get the job? I am the resistance. I pick arms. Qatar send me millions. If I stop the resistance, what am I going to do? Drive a cab? What else? Yeah, I mean, we're capable, determined people. We can build things. It's going to take time. It's much easier to continue milking Qatar and Iran, especially when they're more than willing to support that cause. So if somebody says, let's stop it, there might be an armed uprising by Hamas and others. No, we're not going to stop. We're going to keep fighting. That's the industry.
I'm not sure where all this is ultimately going to go. It just seems like we're going around and around and around in circles. Do you see any solution to this other than one side wiping out the other?
Well, Elon Musk says the most entertaining outcome is the most likely, generally. So I don't know what it means in this context, but maybe more of the same. I don't know, more of the same. There's not going to be, World War II, the moment the victory was declared and surrender, not a single shot was shot after that, right? Not a single shot. It was over forever. I wish we had a solution like this here. It can happen between Russia and Ukraine at some point, although I'm not that optimistic about that anymore either, because certain things are going to be disputed for a while. But with Russia and Israel, the only solution is to evacuate the entire Israel and move it to South Florida and make Fort Lauderdale the capital, or West Palm Beach. So that would be, and then they can keep killing each other and fighting each other in the Arabian region. I don't see another solution.
The other thing that I took note of, and Lori, I think you did too this week, was the food aid that was being dropped. And then it was like, it didn't matter what it's just clear. It doesn't matter what the United States does. They can do no right. Even when they're dropping food, I ran a video of a guy throwing a food packet in a dumpster. He didn't want it. And then they're getting all this negative publicity because 5 people, they said, were killed by, falling food from parachutes that didn't open. And it now, it's like
imperialist sandwiches. They were killed by imperialist MREs. I'm sorry.
The other really scary
thing,
the
U.S. disputes that. They say that's not what happened at all. I don't know who to believe.
The other really disappointing thing, and just generally disappointing here and there, is a small group of people. I don't know, maybe Hamas is not that small. One mayor, one governor, one leader can make millions miserable in the most extreme misery. We know we have mayors here who can cause destructive policies and turn things upside down. What you see in Gaza now is on a different level. You have leaders who sit in Qatar in fancy hotels, and with their policies, with what they're doing, they cause so much misery. Because we know that if nothing else, that if you don't believe anything else that Israel says, If Hamas surrendered and laid their arms at that very moment, there would be peace. It would immediately stop. That is true.
That's a really
Absolutely.
key, important point, right? If Hamas wanted this to end, all they have to do is give up the hostages
And surrender.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and don't be
surrender.
in power. You want to exile. You want to do whatever. You want to go somewhere. You want to exile. Then, but it's not going to happen because that's incompatible with who they are.
Exactly.
What's your view on UNRWA funding? Because in Canada, was it yesterday or the day before? I think it was yesterday. The federal government here announced that funding for UNRWA will resume. They put a pause on it because of the connections that were exposed between UNRWA and Hamas, and some of these UN workers working through UNRWA, I guess, were actually involved in the October 7th attack. Canada paused funding for UNRWA yesterday, announcing that it will now resume. What are your views on that?
So I have a very cynical view. We know that UNRWA is the largest employer in Gaza, right? Number one. Number two, for a foreigner to go to work there, how strongly do you have to feel about what's going on? And how strongly do you have to be against Israel? Will you really pass? Will it be really too much to assume that they could have endorsing or celebrating or supporting whatever happened in October 7 or other acts of resistance? No. Never occurred to me that something like this can happen in UN. I thought UN was a completely separate, totally neutral body, but not when it's in Gaza, not when it employs mostly local people, supports them. So it's messed up.
That's right. And, in that clip of Donald Trump, he was, of course, that was October 7th. That was the day it happened. But, he's always been very bombastic and in his unabashed support for Israel. But I don't know if you guys have noticed, now that the war is dragging on into 5 months and we're starting to, really get into the 2024 election season, even Donald Trump hasn't been saying as much about it. Even he seems to be pulling back, although this past week he said he will finish the problem. But he spent all of 2 minutes out of a 90-minute stump speech even addressing this war in Gaza. Do you guys think that Trump is changing his mind, that he's cooling on Israel and Netanyahu? Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a tough situation. I mean, if he takes a very simple, extreme position, it's not going to be good for him politically, and it's going to be naive. I actually don't know what he's planning to do. I would be very curious to see what he wants to do and what his solutions are. He's been right many times before. It would be interesting. But, Rick?
I think that the whole thing is dangerous politically for all of these candidates. I think RFK Jr. has taken it on the chin on this issue more than anybody. I don't.
Sure is.
It's almost like the people around him used the issue to intentionally sabotage him. It's like they went out hard against RFK because he came out in support of Israel, and yet every other candidate supports Israel as well, and yet he's the one that they keep criticizing, and he was supposed to be their guy. They didn't soften the blow on him at all. It was like he became the guy to go to hold his feet to the fire on that issue without even trying to talk about the other candidates at all. It's been the strangest thing to me where they basically just turned on their own candidate and started plunging knives into him over this issue. I just don't understand it. As for Biden, last night, well, was it last night, the State of the Union? Or 2 nights ago?
Two nights ago.
He's trying to play both sides off against the middle. That's, I think, what that hot mic thing was. That's my assessment. And Trump, he has to, sort of take the same stance. He can't go too far this way or too far that way, because especially right now, I think, we're seeing this rise of this wave of anti-Semitism, and a lot of his base, I think, relates to that, embraces it. He has to cater to that to some degree. And unfortunately, I think that's the new political reality for him and for America and for Canada too. It's I've never seen anything like it, and that's something he's going to have to deal with that. And I think you guys know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I actually like this comment here. By Solar Milonga, anti-Semitism is over misused. Remember that Palestinians are Semites, which is true. And while most European Jews are not, there's a lot of evidence that everyone was Jewish back in the beginning, and then a lot of people were forced to be converted. If you go to Israel today, you would be hard-pressed to distinguish physically between Jews and Arabs, Palestinians, right, and other Middle Eastern Jews. In many ways, it looks fictional and fabricated difference. And let us not forget that almost all of the horrible conflicts that we see today are between people who are most similar to each other. Russians and Ukrainians are indistinguishable in their looks and language. Jews, Palestinians, Saudis, Yemenis, Sunni and Shia, same religion, are killing each other. Are you kidding me? Over some kind of disagreement about what Muhammad did and why he did it? I mean, come on. But that's what's happening.
True.
Yeah, but that's what's happening. So,
you know, since you brought up RFK Jr., and you know, everybody knows I'm a volunteer on Kennedy's campaign, strong supporter, and let me tell you guys, the last 5 months on the campaign has been a wild ride, a wild ride. But you know, Kennedy has been a lifelong supporter of Israel. All of the Kennedys are strong supporters of Israel. President Kennedy started the special relationship between the United States and Israel. He was the first president to sell arms to Israel when Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower didn't want to do that because they didn't want to alienate the Arabs. They needed the oil, let's be honest. Of course, his father, Robert Kennedy Sr., gave his life for Israel. That's the reason that Sirhan Sirhan showed up at the Ambassador Hotel with a gun that night and shot 5 people and may or may not, depending on what you believe, have shot and killed Senator Kennedy. He was certainly shooting at Senator Kennedy. It's still a topic that's hotly debated to this day between historians, and even Robert Kennedy Jr. himself doesn't believe that Sirhan fired the fatal shots. But Kennedy continues to support Israel. And getting back to the topic of the show tonight, is Israel the most moral army in the world? I brought a clip where Kennedy makes the argument that the IDF is the most moral army in the world and that they're waging this war as ethically as you can possibly wage a war. Take a listen to this.
Sir? Hi, thanks for everything you're doing. I'm Curtis Slipman, and I live in Miami Beach. The October 7th, 2023 massacre has enormously impacted Palestinians and Israelis, as well as highlighted the ongoing conflict the USA has had with Iran. Despite the USA decimating the Iranian Navy in the one-day war of 2008, Iranian intransigence and support of terror has continued in an uninterrupted fashion. More recently, there's a loose alliance backing with Iran by China and Russia. Would you share your thoughts regarding this Iranian conflict and your ideas regarding resolution?
Yeah, I mean, Iran gives, Iran is the principal financer of Hamas, and it directs Hamas. And Hamas is a criminal organization. You know, the principal leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, has $5 billion net worth. His 2 cohorts collectively, they have $11 billion that they've stolen from the people of Gaza. And the West Bank is not much better. West Bank, where Islamic Jihad and Hamas are in the West Bank, they're also funded by Iran. The international aid agencies have given more money to the Palestinian people than any people in the world, and yet none of it gets them. It goes to buying weapons and to enriching their leadership. And, you know, Yasser Arafat died a billionaire. His wife, who lives in France, is a billionaire. His successor, Mahmoud Abbas, is a billionaire. His sons have $750 million. Oh, it's a it's an organized crime syndicate that schools their children to kill Jews. You know, the charter of Hamas says in the charter, it says that the single purpose of Hamas is the annihilation of Israel and the genocide not of every Jew in Israel, but every Jew in the world, and that it is a violation of Islam to even negotiate with Israel except as a ruse. This is what it says in their charter, which I've read. Oh, and Hamas is driven and funded by Iran, as is Hezbollah in Lebanon, as are the Houthis in Yemen, and all of these conflicts are connected to that. And I was among the strongest voices of protest when President Biden authorized the $2.6 billion transfer of wealth from Egypt and Qatar, and then $6 billion after that. And the fact that President Biden failed to enforce the sanctions against Iran, which bring in now $65 billion a year and allow them the money to fund these jihadi terror organizations. And I have great sympathy for the Palestinian people. I have many Palestinian friends. Cheryl and I, my wife, who's in this audience today, have visited the West Bank. We have met with the top leadership. We've eaten at the dinner table with Palestinian shepherds and business people. I have a friend who is in South Gaza today with 5 children. I sent him money to his bank yesterday, and I'm deeply concerned with the impacts of civilians on the West Bank, but I don't think Israel has any choice. I think that you cannot, Hamas, as they took over, Israel walked out of Gaza. It's not an occupied territory. Israel walked out of it in 2005. Hamas took over in 2006, rounded up the Palestinian leadership, the Palestinian Authority leadership, shot them through the kneecaps, brought them up to the highest buildings in Gaza and threw them off the roof, and then declared war on Israel and began firing rockets at Israel. And between 2006 at the takeover and October 7th, they fired 30,000 rockets at Israel. There's no other country in the world that would tolerate that. What did Israel do? Instead of going in there and removing them, they didn't want to go in. So they built the Iron Dome with our help so that they wouldn't have to go in. And every time that Hamas fires a rocket at civilians in Israel, instead of going in there, shoots the rocket down. It costs Hamas $800 to fire that rocket and build it. It costs Israel $40,000 to shut it down. But they put up with that because they didn't want to go in there. But the October 7th invasion, where 3,000 people came across the border, where they disabled the fences, the automatic machine guns, the surveillance system on the fences, and showed now the capacity. They've got 40,000 troops there living in tunnels. And they don't shelter their own population, by the way. They put the soldiers in and protect them, and then use the civilians as civilian shields. Oh, if Mexico suddenly elected a communist government and said, now we're going to take back Texas, and started firing, missiles onto Houston and San Antonio, we would go in there, and we wouldn't wait 30 years or 16 years. We would go in immediately. And, I don't see that Israel has a choice.
Bobby, we have time.
Yeah, that's an interesting scenario. As a Texan myself, we've been invaded at our southern border for 30 years, and now we're getting invaded like never before. But let's just play with that thought for a moment. What if Mexico did to us? What if they came across our border, raped our women, killed innocent families, fired rockets into Texas? How long do you think it would take us to unleash shock and awe on Mexico? Guys, anybody want to take that one?
I'm no longer sure anymore. It's been so long since we did something like this. Also, the way we handle crime, the way we handle either crises, how passive we are about it. Would we take a radically different strategy with this type of invasion? I don't know, but I really love what he said, what RFK Jr. said. I went to his fundraiser here in Los Altos a couple of months ago, and I really, very measured, very reasonable, and at the same time, you know what? I'm going to stand just like DeSantis. This is my opinion. I'm not going to be weather waning and seeing where the wind is blowing. This is how I feel, and I'm going to give it to you straight up, and I appreciate. It's hard to disagree with him. I mean, yeah.
But the response depends always on how much public support there is for it. And as I sit and look at the narrative that was spun up after October 7th, it was that Israel let the attack happen. And then it progressed from that to not only did they let the attack happen, Israel actually killed their own people. And as I'm listening to that kind of rhetoric, I'm appalled. and I'm shocked to see people buying into it. But I shouldn't be that surprised because it's becoming a theme, a recurring approach to propaganda, I would say, in America. So would the United States respond that way to Mexico? No, because you know why? Before they do that, that attack were to happen, people would be propagandized to think that the United States is just a colonial power and that they have it coming. And that's really what goes on.
And it was an inside job.
And
they'll say we did it to ourselves.
Which actually may have some real truth to it, because there's no doubt that you have some bad actors in government that are on the take, corrupted with foreign money. There's, of course, that kind of thing is going on. It goes on all over the world. So then it becomes very easy, though, to point your finger at government and say, oh, it's just an inside job. See, the government's to blame anyway. You did it to yourselves.
Right. Yeah. They just want to start another war.
Yeah. There's some truth, but it's not that simple.
And there's more to that. I didn't want to play a really long clip because you know how Bobby is. He gives very thorough, very detailed answers, and you can't get sound bites out of Kennedy. He'll take 20 minutes to answer a question. So there's more to that. And what he says, and I wanted to ask you, Arkady, because you've served in the IDF, but he talks about how they're waging the war in Gaza, and that, how they do, they send out text messages to the phones, they call landlines before they do an airstrike. They let go of the element of surprise, which is pretty much unheard of in warfare. The United States certainly didn't do that in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Vietnam. We don't drop leaflets to warn each neighborhood before an airstrike that we're going to hit your neighborhood, you need to evacuate. But Israel does do that. They even have the roof knockers that sort of give you an advance warning before they hit a building. So, Arkady, as someone who's been in the IDF, first of all, is that true?
Yeah.
Is it? And how the heck are they supposed to win a war without the element of surprise?
So completely, considering how smart the Jews are, completely idiotic way of fighting. You warn people, you let all the terrorists run away through tunnels that exist. You let them prepare and hide. They're not even in uniform. So you basically put yourself at a maximum disadvantage to please the world. And this is how the right-wingers in Israel would talk. You put yourself at maximum disadvantage just to please public opinion in the world, not domestically. And then who are you fighting? And then you're blowing up random buildings with random people. Maybe you kill a few. And who is Hamas? If I'm picking up RPG today, am I Hamas? Do I need to enlist? Do I need to sign something? What makes me Hamas or not Hamas? If I'm dancing after October 7th, but I haven't touched anyone, I haven't killed anyone, and I'm not planning to kill anyone, am I Hamas? I mean, the same with Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine was talking about counteroffensive months before. Like, who does that? Remember how Germany attacked Russia on June 22nd at 4:30 in the morning while
Right.
everybody thought they were. This is how you do it.
That's right.
So I don't get it.
Well, see, that's what I argue, that's why the United States has not won a war in a long time, because we're really not in it to win it. We want to prolong it. It makes money for the military contractors. It keeps the war machine fed. And we really don't go in to win those wars. A perfect example of that is Afghanistan, right? We went in supposedly to destroy the Taliban in 2001, and we spent 20 years there. All that blood and treasure wasted. And yet, at the end of it all, we handed the country and a lot of our military equipment right back to the Taliban.
Now, the question is, have we learned any lessons from this terrible, terrible mismanagement? Have we? I don't think so. We're not in the business of learning lessons. We're in the business of doubling down on things that don't work. That's our business.
Exactly. Exactly. And you know, the thing I've always admired about Israel when it comes to warfare is that their wars tend to be very brief. They don't do 20-year wars, right? They had a 6-day war. They had a 1-day war. They get in there, they get the job done, and they get the hell out. And it's over. Although you could argue that this has been one long war with several ceasefires since 1948. I guess it depends on how you look at it.
You know, I underestimated how much they care about public opinion, about international opinion. They care tremendously, and I'm watching Israeli podcasts, politicians speak. They're going to do what they have to do, but it matters a lot to them what the world thinks, and they're not happy about this uprising all around the world against them. They're not happy. They're kind of used to it a little bit, but they do care.
But I'd say it's never been quite like this. Have you ever seen backlash like this against Israel? It's always been there, but not to this degree.
Because no such invasion has taken place. Because here people are looking for proportionality, right? They want to see proportionality, which is also considered a liberal value. Let's not fix the problem, but let's just equalize things, right? So if you steal something from me and you put it back, no harm done, a month later, I don't know. So
I know we're just about out of time here. Rick, did you have any final questions for Arkady?
No, I'm just, I don't even know what to say, because it just seems like there just doesn't seem to be any apparent solution to this. I'm concerned because I see this rise in anti-Semitism, or that's not even the right phrase, anti-Jew rhetoric, hate. Honestly, I'm seeing a huge swell of that. I never thought I would ever see that or hear people speak the way they do today. It's appalling to me. It's causing such division. It's causing disruption here within our channel. My community. I don't know what to do. And as I listen to people speak, even though Biden is saying we need a two-state solution, it seems like that's not a solution. It's not even really truly on the table. And I'm just at a loss, Arkady. I don't even know what to ask you or to say anymore, because it just seems like the only solution is one side wiping the other side out, which to me is, I can't even think about it.
if Hamas was as pragmatic as Russia and said we're always open to talk and negotiate, let's just talk. If they were more business and pragmatic and not ideologically oriented, there would be a solution. And I'm putting blame on them because they say no compromise. So what do you expect Israel? What do you expect Israel to do? They want them to leave. And if you interview people on the streets, they say go back to Poland, go back to Germany. Well, either it's a solution or there is no solution. And Rick, how do you explain that you look like Viktor Orban and Jair Bolsonaro? How do you explain that?
I'm not touching that.
Okay. Am I the first one to say that?
Sadly, it seems that the two-state solution is just not a possibility. In the Russia-Ukraine war, I think there is some hope of diplomacy, but...
Did you see Viktor Orban went to visit Trump at Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah.
I saw that video. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you there, Lori.
No problem.
That was wild.
Yeah.
In this case, I'm afraid you're right, Rick. I'm
One
afraid
more
it's going to
observation.
come down to a military solution.
One more observation. Bukele came to speak at CPAC, right? The president of El Salvador gave an amazing speech. Imagine what Bukele would have done if he was Bibi Netanyahu. There would be nothing left of Gaza today. Okay,
That's right.
nothing.
Would have
So it can always
unleashed
get
on
worse. Whoever thinks that Bibi is a terrible warmonger, murderer, blah blah blah, I think the president of El Salvador would take a much harsher approach to all this. That's all I have to say. That's my feeling.
That's right. That's right. If you want to win a war, you really have to stop caring about what everybody thinks. And just get in there and get the job done.
Yeah, that's what it took to win every war. A complete destruction, surrender, submission, humiliation. Call it what you want. That's what it takes. So
that's why the United States hasn't won a war since 1945. Let's be honest.
Like you said, maybe it wasn't the goal.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And if
At
that's
least
the
that's
case,
my conspiracy theory.
Lori, if that's the case, then maybe the truth is the United States is not the big bully, the behemoth, the monster, the evil Satan, the big Satan that so many people around the world really want us to believe.
That's an interesting thought, isn't it? They say that's what we are. That's what so many believe that we are. And of course, I don't think we ever should have gone into the Korean conflict or Vietnam. I think every war since 1945 was misguided at best, because we weren't attacked. I've always been of the belief that if you weren't invaded and you weren't attacked on your shores, then you had no business invading another country. But in this case, I do support Israel and their war because they were invaded. They were attacked in the most savage of ways. And this is, like Arkady's explained tonight, this has been an ongoing problem. There have been several mini October 7ths over the years, right? But October 7th was the worst attack since the Holocaust on the Jewish people.
And one critical distinction with our terrorist attacks, you could say that some other attacks are been initiated by just random people and not at the authority of government. This was explicitly directed by the government of Gaza. Authorized, directed, financed, supported, whatever. Those were not just a bunch of random people who decided again to one day. That would be a completely different story. There would be no justification to this type of invasion, maybe. This was sanctioned by the government itself. So
that's right. That's right. And how do you make peace with Hamas? I mean, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. And remember, there was a ceasefire in place on October the 6th.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Hamas has violated how many ceasefires over the years? Many. I've lost count.
And I just don't want my previous comment to be misinterpreted. I'm not trying to excuse any sins that have been committed at any time through history. I'm just saying that when it comes to geopolitics, when you're a superpower like Russia or the United States or China or now even Iran, these nation states, they act in their own interests and their interests and that they need to act in their interests extend beyond their borders. I mean, because all of these countries are involved in international trade, so all of these things and defense and these things become much more complicated. And other countries call upon these superpowers for support militarily, economically, in culturally in a variety of different ways. So these things become complicated. It's not as always simple as people think they are. And the public is usually sold a simplified message so that they can understand it in some way, so that they ultimately are sold something in the end. But the intricacies, the nuance, the reality is you're dealing with shades of gray. It's not black and white. None of these things through history ever have been. And as they overlap and things become even more complicated over time, and we get to where we are today, that's what we're dealing with. And not just in Gaza, but in Ukraine as well. These things are not black and white. And there are sometimes even multiple realities. It depends on your reality, your perspective, right? How you see it because of where you live and where your personal situation is, and whether it was your mom or dad that got bombed, right, and killed, or whether you just, do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not,
Yeah.
It just becomes very, very, very complicated.
It is. And Arkady, I know you got to go. I just saw your message in the private chat. But before we do, please tell folks where they can find you and follow you and catch more of your work.
Okay. Well, I don't know about my work, but for any hate, let me provide an email. I'm going to put my hate in the chat, my email in the chat. I'm welcome hate as long as it's not pure insults. If you want a voice, why can't I put my email here in the comment? Why can't I access comments? Let me see.
We can put it up on the screen if you like.
Yeah.
Let me remove myself here. Now I should be able to do it. 1 second. Join the chat. Doesn't let me join the chat.
Oh, you're locked out. Sorry. I don't know how that happened.
I locked myself out.
Tell us your email and we'll put it up
It's
on the
Arkady,
screen.
like my first name, Arkady, at arkadylaw.com. ARKADYLAW.com.
Arkady.law.
No.
Right?
Arkady at arkadylaw.com.
Got it. We're working on it. And you also, one of the members of our Maverick News Network is Kevin Michelizzi, our mutual friend over in Crimea. And you're frequently a guest on his program as well, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to send some of our Maverick family over to the American in Crimea YouTube channel. I think he's also on Rumble, where you can catch more of Arkady. I just love talking to you. You're an incredibly intelligent guy. And always such a good conversation. 2 hours just flew by like I knew it would. I could easily talk to you for 2 more, but we'll do this in the future. Let's hope that it'll be under more pleasant circumstances. And I personally hope that Israel can mop things up quickly like they usually do, and that this war won't turn into a 20-year fiasco or spread across the Middle East or, turn into one of those 20-year quagmires like the United States does. I do wish the IDF success. I honestly do. And my love to you, Arkady. I think we just lost him. Oh, you're back.
And he's back.
Yeah, just wanted to say good night, my friend. And as always, peace. Good night, everybody. See you next.
In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.